I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and it's time to get wealthy. You're going to learn exactly what you need to know and do to finally achieve the level of financial success you desire and you deserve. So let me ask you a question. What is your inheritance? Did your family create a financial legacy for you? Well, that's exactly what our topic is about today, legacy wealth. And here's what I want you to know about legacy wealth, or what they don't want you to know about legacy wealth. And that is that wealth building is not taught through your formal education. The truth is that the knowledge of how to build wealth is inherited through a family advisor or someone in your family. And you must also understand that the knowledge of how to build wealth is the most valuable asset of all. And that's why I'm excited to have a conversation today about this topic of legacy wealth. Our guest was someone who got exposed to what it meant to create a financial legacy at a very early age. And I'm excited to introduce her to all of you today. So let's invite Kim Nixon on to Get Wealthy. Kim, really excited to have you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Deborah. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you.
Well, why I'm really excited to talk to you today is we've had many conversations about this topic. And I think as it relates to creating legacy wealth, just share with our audience a little bit about yourself and what legacy wealth really means to you.
Yes. So, Deborah, you know me over many years of working together. And for me, wealth building, specifically in the Black community, is about making sure that we have assets that can last beyond our lifetime. And so much of that is actually beyond the physical asset or the financial asset that you're passing down. So much of that is about knowledge, the way that you just mentioned. And one of the things that we see very often is that once an asset is passed on to a child, if that child has not been raised to value that asset or to understand how to continue to care for it, that can lead to either the loss of that asset or increased liabilities. And specifically, I'm talking about real estate. So as you know, I grew up in a house with a father that's a contractor. My mom is a nurse. And we did not have any money. We did not come from money. But my parents instilled in my sister and myself two really important values. The first of which was you can find a way, and a work ethic that is unparalleled, frankly. Sometimes I think it's a little too strong, and I need to learn how to scale it back a bit. But you can make anything happen. And I watched them do it. I watched them work more than 2 jobs at a time, sometimes, all with that American dream of buying their first home. And that home was not in great repair. And my dad put the time in, and he put a hammer in my hand at a very early age. He didn't have any little boys, and so he just made me his apprentice. And so we got to work on that first property. And then my parents were able to kind of rinse and repeat and do that again. And through that effort, I learned a lot about, number one, the value of the asset that they were leaning into and that they were investing in. I learned the value of sweat equity and what it really meant to be able to use your 2 hands to get yourself beyond where you are today. And I also learned how you go about creating pockets of opportunity in order to, and sometimes that opportunity does mean more work, in order to get yourself to the point where you can make that investment and you can move yourself beyond the point where you are today to where you are tomorrow. And I want to stop and say really quickly, I completely understand that there are lots of barriers and challenges up against us all. And this is not an easy process. This is not something that happens overnight, but it is a process that if you continue to work on it, you teach yourself, you teach your children what it looks like to make step change. And that is as important as the asset that you're passing on. That's wealth building to me.
Absolutely. And the truth is that when it comes to legacy wealth, only 25% of Black Americans even get inherited wealth. And what Kim and what we're going to have a conversation about today is really what that means, and how even though it can put you in a less advantaged position, the whole process and the whole conversation today is really about what you can do. It's just so interesting, Kim. You alluded to the fact that we've known each other for several years, and how we met really was at that time you were in this significant position at Under Armour, but in spite of that, you invited me in to talk with your colleagues about wealth building because that was really, really important to you. And so my question to you really is, especially as it relates to you being exposed to parents who had these values and were really building a legacy for their family, why was it important for you to also bring other people on along the way?
This is my favorite topic. So, my parents, and I would say my family in general, have really strong values around community and family and the importance of family. I was raised, yes, by my mom and my dad, but when they were out doing those 2 to 3 jobs, trying to make sure that they had the security they needed to get to that first property, that meant I had several aunties and uncles and cousins that were pitching in to make sure that, we were all able to complete the tasks that we needed to complete to get along and to move towards that wealth building. So all of this happened within a community. None of this happens in a vacuum or in a bubble. My sister and I were in rigorous scholarship programs. So we were going to school, we were going to our regular school, and then we were going to an additional academy on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and then all summer long, at least when I was in the 5th grade and 6th grade. And that required my entire family. It required so many people to really get us there. And so the idea of community has always been central to wealth building for me, and it's true of many communities. If you look at a lot of different ethnic communities, wealth is built through communal accumulation of dollars and use of dollars, and that'll happen to buy Dunkin' Donuts, to buy gas stations, to buy businesses that are then managed and owned and managed by a family. And very often, the only way that Dunkin' Donuts or that gas station or what you have will be profitable is because they have the labor pretty much covered through family costs and family coverage in terms of time. And so for us, my family's Caribbean, and a lot of what that looks like is something we call partner money, some people call susu, and you can call it a 0 interest loan, you can call it an early advance if you want, but it's really kind of like a communal pot of money that is then put together by about 20 people or so, that is then distributed out every week or every 2 weeks based on need or based on where you stand in the schedule. And just this idea of community, and this being a way that people are able to pay their bills, be able to put their kids through college, able to kind of get ahead, pay for vacation, whatever the case may be. It was a way that the community all surrounded each other to make sure that we were good. And this idea of we were good has stuck with me forever. So to your point, when I was at Under Armour, we were building the Black Employee Network called BEAT. And one of the first things I wanted to do was figure out, are y'all good? And I don't mean from a work perspective, but, financially, are we good? We work at this place, at the time Under Armour was doing great. We worked in a city, in a secondary market, so it wasn't the most expensive market to live in. And I wanted to make sure people had the tools that they needed. There were a lot of young Black professionals at Under Armour, and still are. And I wanted to make sure people had the tools, that they were able to have the conversation. I wanted to make sure money wasn't taboo. In my communities and in my groups of friends, money is not taboo. it is something that we can talk about freely. And that is something else that really needs to happen in order for us to understand and be able to go to each other and say, hey, how'd you do that thing? How'd you get that mark off your credit score? How did you buy that property? How did you, find that daycare for your child? And so all of these things are to be shared. The more that we can learn to share them and to trust each other and even approach each other with compassion instead of competition, that's where a lot of real information and opportunity for legacy and wealth building begins.
Well, you just validated the first point that I made around what they don't want you to know about legacy wealth. And that really is that it is inherited, right? Like a close family member or family advisor, someone really has to kind of show you the way, because you don't learn it in your formal education. And certainly this is true of you. When we met, you had already built, because of your parents, a pretty significant real estate investment portfolio, and you were investing in that secondary market that you now lived in. And yet you reached out for me to Wealthy You for more knowledge around expanding that, your own competency around investing. And so when we come back, what I want to ask you about is really why you felt the need to do that. So I want to just talk about, you just talked really eloquently around the power of community and how in so many communities we aren't getting access to that information. And so that's how we met, with you inviting me to Under Armour. When we come back, I want to get into now how you specifically began to expand your own knowledge and use different strategies on your pathway to financial independence. So don't go anywhere, folks. It's Get Wealthy. I'm Deborah Owens, and we'll be right back.
Let's be honest, as successful women, we're crushing it. Maxed out 401k and Roth IRA? Check. Aggressive savings and investments? Check. Yet, the freedom our success was supposed to buy can leave us stuck on the six-figure hamster wheel, watching retirement slip further down the road. There's another way. Get coaching courses and community at wealthyu.com.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Welcome back. I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and I'm having a fascinating conversation today about legacy wealth. What does it mean to create generational wealth? Well, that's exactly the conversation that we're having with Kimberly Nixon, who was exposed to legacy wealth through her parents and really began to see that there was more that she needed to learn. And so, Kimberly, thank you so much for sharing, and you always do, because you understand the power of knowledge and getting access to the right knowledge. So when we met after that panel that I sat on at Under Armour, you then said, listen, I need to know how to invest. So talk to us a little bit about why that was important to you in just expanding your own knowledge around finances and what it meant to become financially independent.
Yeah, so I was already working diligently on figuring out what financial independence looked like. I had joined all the forums, I'd listened to all the podcasts, but I really had one tool, and that was real estate. And to my parents' credit, that was the tool that they gave me. But we weren't really at the place where we were thinking about abundance. We weren't thinking about how you grow beyond, real estate or real estate portfolio. And so I was not diversified at all, and I knew it. And I was getting to the point in my career where I also understood that I would need to start looking at investing more broadly and use a skill set that I have beyond real estate to make sure that I was building for myself and for my family. Real estate, at least for me at the time, because it was my personal portfolio, was time intensive. And while I've, kind of addressed a good chunk of that, at the time I was thinking about where else I should be looking. I was never really comfortable investing in the stock market. You have to remember, I graduated right after a downturn. And then when I was in business school, I was in business school during a market crash. And so I just generally found myself straying away from markets outside of my retirement plans and some mutual funds. And I wanted to do what I know how to do best from my work, my actual career. I've been a strategist for a very long time, and the basis of that is that you build great frameworks, and that if you can build a great framework, you can then apply that framework to a variety of situations, and that'll help to simplify what could otherwise be complicated. And so the stock market wasn't specifically complicated or intimidating. It just wasn't something that I had a great framework for. And so I really wanted to leverage your expertise and to figure out how I, frankly, work through the mindset challenge that I had more than anything else to start to see this as an opportunity and an asset class for me as well. We worked together over a number of weeks, and you helped me build a tremendous framework that made me more comfortable, made me even want to spend more time doing research, because that was another thing. I was like, if I'm not going to do the research and I don't have the time, then this is not a place that I should be, putting my dollars if I'm going to be uninformed. I don't want to be an uninformed investor. And so you really helped me figure out how much time I needed to spend, what that framework looked like, so that when I did spend time researching, I was doing it in a more organized fashion, that I knew how to use each part of my research for various metrics. And that absolutely helped me think through. I mean, I'm going to be really honest. I wanted to think through how to park money in the stock market so I could buy more real estate. But along the way, I got savvier and really kind of stuck to my diversification goals. And that helped me to be where I am now, where I have more flexibility. I have more control over liquid versus illiquid assets. I have another tool in my belt for how I want to teach my children about wealth building. So they both have, my two sons have their own stock portfolios as well. And I'm, really grateful for the opportunity to take the framework for how to teach your kids about wealth building that was given to me by my parents, and expand that framework to now be about real estate, the stock market, and other parts of investing as well.
Well, you said something really interesting. First off, the first thing I want to chat with you about is, listen, sis, you just came out of business school, right? I mean, a very prominent business school.
Yeah.
And yet, are you telling me that you did not learn about investing while you were in business school?
We certainly had all the classes on corporate finance, on market dynamics, on how to value a company, on cash flow analysis. We had all of those things. I remember we even went through an exercise where we chose a handful of stocks that we would have invested in, and we would have created a portfolio of our own. So it wasn't that it didn't exist. I was not of the mindset that this was for me. And so all of those things were very time intensive. When I did them in school, that was a whole course. And so when I thought about this from a perspective of a young mother working, managing a real estate portfolio, and figuring out where to put my next dollar, going back to look at my Professor Demoterin textbook and figure out how to invest in the stock market, that was not it was not applicable in the same way. That was an academic and theoretical setting that came with a ton of research and work around it. And so that was my mindset going in, is like, I have to go and pick this up in order to do this thing. And that was not going to happen. So I was really looking to build my own framework that would leverage what I had already learned, leverage the tools and, you know, some of the various ways that you teach others about investing in the stock market. But more than anything, Deborah, I was not in the right mindset for it. And so much of wealth building is about getting yourself to the right mindset. And to me, you know, I very much believe in the highest and best use of the dollar. And to me at the time, I could only see that the highest and best use of the dollar was in real estate for me. And I needed that shift. I needed the perspective shift. And so it was a matter of being at the right time in the right place when I met you.
Well, it is interesting that you brought up mindset. And even though you had all this knowledge, and that's what I want our audience to understand, is that this knowledge is inherited. And if you don't have someone to kind of break it down for you, which really is what we do in Wealthy You, is that framework of understanding that you don't have to, you know, be a rocket scientist, right, to figure this out. And it doesn't require all of the detailed research that you may have had in an MBA. You also brought up something else that I wanted to ask you about in terms of strategy. You already had a framework for investing in real estate, and something that you shared within Wealthy You, that process, right? If you were to reflect now, how did what you already know influence how you now approach investing and building your own portfolio based on this new thing and what you already know? How did that kind of inform how you've proceeded thus far?
Well, I think there are a handful of pieces or answers to that question. The first is with any new investment, any new investment that you're making, if it's your first time doing it, there's a sense of fear. There's risk involved in all investments, and so there's this exercise that has to happen when, at least for me, where I walk myself through all the risk scenarios, and then what are my 2 to 3 ways of de-risking? What are my mitigations? What are my exit opportunities? And that's something that I started with real estate. And again, this is where my parents were really helpful. I remember when I bought my first property, I was 23, and I was just at the point where I was getting ready to sign that check for escrow. And it was a big amount of money for me at 23. And I remember calling my mom first, and she's like, Kim, it's real estate. The chances of it going to zero overnight are small, and you can sell it. And I called my dad, and my parents live completely separate lives at this point. And so imagine my shock to hear him say the exact same thing. And so, I kind of knew, I was like, these are conversations they were having with each other 20 plus years ago. And so there's this idea that, like, when you're going into anything that feels a little scary, you want to figure out, what are my opportunities for mitigating? And that is an approach I still take in all of my investments at this point, which is, can I afford to lose this money? If I lose it, what's the absolute risk that it poses to me, my family, my lifestyle? Are there other ways to mitigate this risk through my investments in other places? On the stock market side specifically, I looking at the price that you get in at and making sure that it's priced well enough and reasonably enough that you have enough room to be able to weather some ups and downs. And also, like, how long until you need that money, right? And so the thing that actually made me very comfortable and timing wise made me more comfortable when I started to think about investing in the public market is that I was investing with money I didn't need. And that was part of my financial independence journey, was getting to the point where I didn't need this money. So I was now comfortable taking this risk. And real estate for me had a different purpose. It was a cash flowing asset. And so I needed that money. And so now I was trying to figure out what to do with the money I didn't need. And so I was at a different point in my building cycle, but I was able to apply several of the same tools in terms of demystifying, de-risking, buying at the right price, and then thinking about what opportunities I'll have if this investment actually grows in a positive direction, and what I will need to either be more conservative about if this is not moving in a more positive direction in terms of an investment.
Oh, you just described what taking calculated risk is, right? What's my downside? I'm good. Let me make a decision. So when we come back, I want to explore a little bit of not only did you begin to invest in real estate, but you also had this desire to teach other women. So when we could come back, I want to talk a little bit about your motivation behind that. I hope you're enjoying this conversation, because it really is all about legacy wealth, how gaining knowledge from your community or someone else can really influence your success and your ability to take risks. Don't go anywhere, for folks. We're all getting wealthy.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and today's topic is legacy wealth. And I'm having a conversation with Kimberly Nixon, who had really the great fortune of inheriting the knowledge of how to build wealth from her family as they built their legacy wealth through real estate. And so, Kimberly, one of the other questions that I wanted to ask you about, not only were at Under Armour, this whole sense of community that you've had, but even as you've been on this journey, you've wanted to share the knowledge of how to invest in real estate with others. Talk to us a little bit about where's that coming from? That desire that you have to have other people experience what you have.
Whew, okay, so, I think there are a few things happened. So I'd been an investor for quite some time, and I noticed that a handful of things were happening. I noticed that when men were interested in getting invested in real estate, and this is specifically in Baltimore because that was the market that we were in, and so when they were looking for partners, or just kind of having these conversations about potentially getting into the market, there were no women at the table. It may be me, and also, but only kind of tangentially, because my husband was there. And I thought it was so interesting that this was a flip from my experience, because in my experience, the women are always at the table, and they are having conversations about, in my familial experience, we are having these conversations and we are helping each other. And real estate is a very common conversation and topic within my family. So I found this to be so interesting. And so I just started to observe and look and see, how little interest the women, both in my circle and then outside of my circle, had in real estate. And I think it's a combination of a few things. Number one, real estate over the last 20 years, especially with HGTV, has become glamorized and glorified as design. And so there's an interior design element, and that seems fun. And then the actual grit and the hard work and then the renovations, those are almost always portrayed as being done by a man. And then, and also within families in general, we know that we still have a long way to go in terms of making sure that women have a seat at the table in terms of making investment decisions and financial decisions along with their partner. So I found this as an opportunity to, at the very least, share what I was doing. And that's how it started, to share what I was doing with my girlfriends. And especially if their partners were starting to get into real estate, I would ask them what they thought, or where the property is, or what they know about it and what they're excited about. And that started the conversation around, well, what could this look like? And what's your interest level? And what would you want to do long term? And the truth is, real estate as an actual owner operator isn't for everyone, but there are various ways to invest. And so I wanted to do my part to just make sure that people understood that this was an option, an opportunity for them. The second thing that happened is, as I mentioned before, I was very deep on the path of financial independence. And the way I think about financial independence is you should have enough. We've worked so hard, and we should have, and I'm speaking directly to Black women now, we should have enough room and freedom within our budget, within our net worth numbers, within our lifestyle, to leave situations that are no longer working for us. And women, and Black women specifically, I believe, find themselves in situations that are no longer working for us, and they find themselves stuck. And yes, this may happen on the home front, but I'm really talking about at work. And if Ketanji Brown Jackson's hearings and proceedings are indicative of anything, it's the way in which Black women are treated at work, when our work is often either being over scrutinized, or we're being asked to show up with credentials that no one else is being asked to show up with, or we're being asked to do a job that is not our job. And so when that environment no longer serves you, I believe financial freedom and that buffer should be the gap filler until you get to where you need to be. It also gives you a bit of confidence to say what you need to say at work. And sometimes you'll find yourself just needing to raise a hand and say, like, this isn't it. This isn't going to work. The way that I'm being treated, the way I'm being talked to, the way that I'm being asked to work, this isn't going to work. And very often we don't even have the freedom to say those things because we're in fear of losing our jobs. So I wanted to make sure that at the very least, still, I only have one hammer and one nail. I only have one tool at this time, right? So my only tool is real estate. And so I'm like, if this is a tool that I can use to help women and women of color specifically find a path to freedom, I will spend every waking minute that I can teaching you anything I know. And I continue to be on a path to figure out how to create opportunities for investing and for educating for women and women of color specifically, because we deserve this room. We deserve the opportunity to leave situations that do not work.
Well, it's interesting. That's such a fascinating perspective, because you also just described the outcome of wealth, right? The outcome is that ability to have financial independence gives you agency in the world. And what I've heard over and over and over in Wealthy You, as women have experienced their financial transformations, it's exactly that I walk differently now. I walk into rooms differently. I now feel like I have a sense of control of my financial destiny. And that is the power to leave a room when it no longer serves you. Man, that in itself, Kim, to me, is worth everything in the world as you relate to what wealth has meant to you. And, the pursuit of wealth is not money itself. Would you agree that the
Yes.
pursuit of wealth really is that feeling of financial independence that allows you to make choices? And then, and the other thing question I wanted to ask you, I really was fascinated. You are the first woman I have ever coached who actually knew what her number was for financial independence. And so tell me, how did that mindset, how did that become a part of your overall strategy?
I am goal oriented. I need to be working towards something, and it can't be kind of sort of an objective or a goal. It has to be a hard goal. It has to be something that's that I can calculate. It can be so that I can see how close I'm getting to that goal, and I can measure, what actions I've taken that have gotten me closer to whatever that number is, or gotten me further away. And so I always have a number of sorts. And if that's the number of years I want to spend at a place, the number of properties I want to own, I always have a number. So yes, I had I had a financial freedom number, and that method comes from the FIRE community, financial independence, retire early community.
Yes.
That method comes from there. It's an idea that if you have a portfolio of some size and a net worth of some number, that you would be able to basically live off of the math has been different over the years. And so none of this is financial advice. You can literally just Google financial independence, retire early, and you can find your freedom number or the method for your freedom number. But the idea is that if you can live your lifestyle off of 3 to 4% of that freedom number on an annual basis, that your portfolio should generate enough of a return within that same year and same period of time that you won't really see any erosion or loss in terms of your actual net worth number. And so I calculated what that number, as soon as I found the frameworks, right? Because I love a framework.
Exactly.
As soon as I found the framework, oh man, it was on. I was like, okay, here's the number I need to get to. And there are two parts to this. There's, yes, how large your portfolio needs to be. But the other part to this is like, what do you actually need to live on? Because the smaller that number is for what you need to live on, the smaller your net worth number needs to be. And so I'm not telling anybody to go say they're going to live off $15,000 a year or anything of that nature. But, I kind of figured out what I needed. And to your point, wealth building is much less about, for me anyway, flashy cars or anything of that we kind of we culturally associate with wealth. It's about how long can I live freely off of my portfolio, and that nothing gives you more wealth than freedom of your time. There is not a single shoe, bag, car, or vacation that you can buy that is more valuable than actually being able to own 100% of your time. And so once you've gotten to the point where you've got this freedom number, and now you can decide, even at that number, you can decide, I'm going to continue to work. That's my decision, but you're going to walk differently in that place, and you're going to have boundaries and guardrails that you may not have otherwise had. And those are things that are very difficult for me, were boundaries and guardrails. And so you can walk into that place of work differently. You can decide to take a risk and start your own business. You could decide to take a risk and buy real estate. You can decide to take time off and spend it with your kids. One of the things that I knew from an early age was that I wanted to be able to spend a significant amount of time with my kids during their summers. And I wanted to be able to complement whatever they were working on in school with either my own self-tutoring, other tutoring, or real life experiences that would add to the theories that they were learning in school. These were really important ways for me to learn growing up. And so I was able to kind of write in my journal exactly, tangibly, what and quantifiably what I wanted to be able to do with this free time, and what number I needed in order to get there, what kind of lifestyle I wanted to live, and what I needed to raise 2 children at this level of lifestyle. And once I was able to calculate that, it was revised several times. We're talking about years, right? So talking through all of that, figuring out what I was going to do with this freedom was really important, because that keeps you on the track. And the last piece of that net worth number is you've got to get your debt down. And so, that was another big part of my goal and goal setting, was to make sure that I wasn't accruing and incurring more debt, because that was going to get me further and further away from my goal. And so I made some lifestyle changes and decisions over the last 10 years, and that's helped me get to my freedom number.
And I do want to, so when we come back, and you've really touched on a lot of your strategy, knowing your number, diversifying outside of just real estate. When we come back, I want to talk to you about now that you were able to implement some of these strategies, what's next for you. So don't go anywhere first, folks. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit with Kimberly about how making all of these decisions and really having the benefit of that knowledge of how to create legacy wealth has informed her as she moves beyond, and further in her career. So don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Faraji Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and this has been a fascinating conversation with Kimberly Nixon, a real estate investor, investing in stock and branching out into other things. And Kimberly, that's what I want to talk a little with you about with you now. So you went on in your career, you left Under Armour, you've been in some other roles. Talk to us a little bit about how accruing this level of building wealth, right, has now influenced new things, if you will, that you've decided to do.
Yeah, so once I left Under Armour, I went to a PE-backed, a private equity-backed company. And I will never forget, I was sitting in a boardroom, I was sitting in a board meeting with the members from that private equity firm. And I had just moved back to the States from Panama. We lived in Panama for a little while. And I was explaining to them how much I loved Panama and wanted to make it part of my retirement plan by buying a farm or something. I was making light of the situation, but there's some arbitrary rule about buying a farm and citizenship in Panama. And so I was making light of that situation. And the gentleman to the left of me said, yeah, I love Panama. We just sold our property there because we weren't getting down there enough, and so on and so forth. And I just, I looked at that dynamic. I'm in this room to present my budget for the year and talk through my plans for revenue and what have you. And this gentleman is here to approve that budget and my revenue plan. And also, I'm making a joke about retirement, and he's got my whole retirement already. He had it and sold it. And I will never forget, I went home that night and I told my husband, I'm on the wrong side of the table. I'm doing this wrong. I'm hustling backwards. And so I had a new goal. And so I had to figure out what it was going to look like for me to get, we just talked about investing in public markets, to get into private markets. So I left that role and went to a venture-backed company a couple of years later, very similarly, early stage, but very similarly, the folks that I was in a boardroom, I was still on the operator side of the table. And again, I'm looking at the other side of the table. And this time I was smart enough to tell them when I joined, I'm trying to get to your side of the table. So I'm joining because I want to get to your side of the table. And they were incredibly gracious and open and allowed me to, kind of follow along the process of what it looks like to be in venture capital. And, I was responsible for a lot of fundraising for our actual company. And so when I left at the end of 2020, I started to do some consulting and advisory work. I had enough freedom to decide that I didn't want to go back to a full-time job because I needed the time to figure out how I was going to break into venture. And so I advised a handful of startups. I consulted for a couple of larger brands. And then at the beginning of 2022, launched my venture capital firm and fund called Open Venture Capital. And very similarly, it's a small fund, it's a $10 million fund, but I started at the $10 million number because you can have more investors, more seats within a smaller fund. And I'm trying to get as many women and women of color on my cap table. And I'm trying to get as many women and women of color to get invested. And again, I'm a very, very zero pressure individual because I'm not in a position where I need you to do these things. I would love for you to do these things. I want you to come to meetings, to listen to me speak, to hear me pitch, to ask questions. And if you choose not to invest, that's completely up to you. But you will be so much better off for the time spent. And Deborah, as you know, I've done this on the real estate side. When I've invested in other real estate developers, I have invited groups of women to just sit and on a Zoom call with me and that developer to just listen to the types of questions I ask, to ask their own questions, to get more familiar with the project, to see how I think about risk. And this is what I'm talking about just making the space. I'm just trying to make space where space has never been made. I mean, especially in private markets, in private funds, there's a lot of opacity in terms of what is happening. Whose money is this? Where is it getting raised? Where is it going? And because we're so busy head down at work, trying to make sure that we, can put food on the table, not having enough freedom to get out of situations that are dead end for us, we can't pick our heads up long enough to think about something as opaque and far away and mysterious as venture capital. And so my goal is to make that less mysterious. There's nothing mysterious about it. It's taking a sum of money, it's putting it with a fund manager, it's making sure that that fund manager knows what they're doing. And you should ask that fund manager, do you know what you're doing? And you can look for track record, you can look for experience, you can look for.
But it's the same thing, right?
Yes.
Right. I mean, what I want our audience to understand is that is what wealth is. It's a framework, right? It's not the product, it's the process. That's right. And so what you're really just looking at your journey from real estate investor to learning how to invest and build a portfolio, and now venture capital. That's what makes it so possible. So Kim, I just want to really, really thank you for sharing your legacy wealth, sharing in this legacy wealth conversation and being so transparent about it. But clearly you're not finished yet.
I'm not done yet.
That's the exciting part. I love it. I love it. I love it. So thanks so much, Kimberly Nixon, for showing us how to get wealthy and the journey to creating legacy wealth. And so when we come back, I just want to go over. Now it's time for analyze, optimize, maximize. So if you think about Kim's journey, what you see that it really all came down to her having the ability to analyze. And through that, she used a framework, whether it was investing in real estate and being able to apply a similar framework to investing in stocks and now venture capital. And in terms of her strategy, is at every step understanding that when she needed to know more because she wanted to diversify or do more, actually putting herself in a position and asking for some help from someone who already had that expertise, and then maximizing, understanding that her real motivation really was to get to that financial independence number so that she would have the freedom to take risk and venture out into new opportunities. And so when we come back, I just want to share with you the 3 takeaways that I want you to have from today's show on Legacy Wealth. I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation around legacy wealth. And it really is what you need to know in order to create a financial legacy or generational wealth. And so here are your 3 takeaways from today. First, as you can see, legacy wealth creates confidence. We certainly saw that in Kimberly's journey to wealth. And the truth is that this knowledge is transferable. Her parents were able to transfer that knowledge to her. And she, like so many other women, want to see other women, Black women, succeed. And so she's transferring those skills to others. And then finally, that the goal is generational wealth, because that is true freedom. Thanks so much for joining us on Get Wealthy. I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach. I can't wait for you to join us on another episode of Get Wealthy.